It's okay. I can handle it.
None of my stuff is working. Are we live?
Yeah, we are live. See,
hey, Michael's there. No, that's cool. That's awesome.
See, we're live.
I can't click on anything on this. This is crazy. Steph, you want to go ahead and bring us in? Do you know which one is the intro?
No.
Great.
Yeah, I do. I got it.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Steffi Smalls and Chase Vernon.
What's going on, guys? Welcome on into, another episode of Fantasy Intervention. Get excited. Of course. You have my Steffi in here to host for you guys. But we have a very, very special guest. We got Mike F. Florio in the house. What's going on, Mike? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's February. I want to pretend the Super Bowl that we just watched didn't really happen. And so the best way to do that is to start to look forward to next year. So I'm happy to be here and talk 2021 a little bit with you guys.
Yeah, it rocks.
That is absolutely the best way to go about it. Sorry if there's background noise. I can't even mute my mic right now, so that's good. But anyways, off to a great start, off to a phenomenal start. Mike, real quick, can you go through and just tell us, what you're doing, how we know you? Because I bet you have a very familiar voice. To a lot of people.
Maybe. I've been on quite a few podcasts and stuff throughout the years, but right now the best spot to find me is the NFL Fantasy Podcast. Right now it's me and Marcus Grant holding that down. Kimmy Checks and Adam Rank get involved in it at times, and throughout the season they're very involved with it. And then during football season, NFL Fantasy Live or the NFL Fantasy app, NFL Network, any of those locations you could usually find me. And also, not to go for too long, Sirius XM Saturday mornings, myself and Scott Engel hold it down for Rotoballer Radio.
Dude, that's awesome, man. And I've been listening to Marcus Grant and you for a little bit now, and it's a fun show that you guys do over there. It's one of my favorite shows to actually listen to.
Thank you. He makes me look good.
Yeah, he has this tendency to kind of. He has this tendency to just give you layups and leave you with alley oops constantly. So
he's a Warriors fan, so I'll compliment to Steph Curry. He's great at leading the ship.
Dude, it's absolutely fun to listen to you guys. And, if you guys are in the chat, my laptop is completely frozen. So
that's supposed to be on me, my bad.
Oh, no. No, if you guys are in the chat and you guys want to share our show, please do, because I am not able to share right now to Twitter. It's going to be on my page, FF_intervention. Go in there, hit retweet for me because I am not able to right now. But we do have a show sheet. We do have some things to get to, of course. And normally have an advertisement right here, but I'm not even going to mess with that. I want to get into the show. And we're actually going to kick off this show with some rankings, right? Because people love rankings. That's just how it is, man. Rankings get the clicks, of course. But the biggest thing is, where are some of these players going to end up for 2021? So I noticed, Mike, that you put out this article, on NFL.com, right? If you actually go and check it out on NFL.com, or you can actually go check out Mike's Twitter. Mike, if you want to give a shout out for your handle real quick, I think it's Michael F. Florio.
Yep, there's 2 F's in there, which worked out because I only did that because when I tried to get Florio or Michael Florio or whatever, it was all taken. And then years later, I started using the F, so it all worked out.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Me with all the L's.
She bought somebody's Twitter handle and then just kept her own Twitter handle. That was pretty awesome.
Did you really?
Yeah, but then, I did, and then the girl switched it back, so it was just a wasted amount of money, but it's okay.
I tried to buy one once and was rejected.
We still can't get Join Our Circle. It's a freaking knitting company that hasn't been active since 2012, and we can't get it.
I bet they won't give it up though. People are very protective of handles.
They haven't even posted in 6 years or 8 years or something. I keep messaging them hoping that they might pop on and see a message, and then maybe we can get it. But no, it's interesting, where where your rankings go, right? So if you go check out on Mike's Twitter page, that's Michael F. Florio. You guys can actually go and click on his little link down at the bottom for NFL.com, and all of his articles come up, right? So I was kind of diving into those, and I was looking across, some of your rankings, and some were relatively easy, and I agreed with, but some were, I guess, a little bit not questionable, but I guess diverse compared to what the normal fantasy community views as some of these players. So I want to start out with the quarterback position. We're going to give you a little bit of an easier layup. The top 3 in your rankings, and I don't want to go through and give away all your rankings. We're not here to do that. But for the top 3, you had Mahomes, you had Allen, and you had Murray. They are super close in the rankings for me. So how did you decide which route you wanted to go?
So for me, Mahomes is the unquestioned QB1 just because of what he does each and every year. Like, Josh Allen and Kyler Murray did outscore him in 2020, but Mahomes had a higher points per game number than they did. And also, going back to 2018, 2019, like this 3-year stretch, he is by far the best fantasy quarterback. So for me, I view it kind of how I view Mike Trout in fantasy baseball is the best example I could make. Is he going to be the number 1 player every single year? No. But is he the safest bet to be top 5? Yes. So to me, Mahomes, he just comes with the floor and ceiling that no other quarterback can really match. So he is one for me. And then the next 2, I debated, and originally I had Kyler Murray higher. I am a Bills fan, but I try not to be biased.
Oh, there it is.
I try not to be biased when it comes to my love for Josh Allen. I just trust him a little bit more as a passer than I did Kyler Murray. I think both of them can run and add plenty of fantasy points with their legs, but the fact that Brian Dable and Diggs and all the pieces around Josh Allen are returning, that was enough for me to put him as the QB2.
So does that include the postseason?
Yes. Yeah. I do, like I watch the playoffs and I factor it all in, but I try not to be one of those people too who overhype the playoffs because
of course.
I think it gets put under a microscope by a lot of people.
Yeah. Because I think before the playoffs, I probably would agree. And then after the playoffs, I might end up pushing Kyler over Allen.
Which I can get. Like, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Those 2 are just, you can't go wrong.
It's hard to pick between the 2 of them.
Well, yeah, sitting there and looking at it, the big reason why Josh Allen kind of fell out last year was because of the playoff game that he had and how horrible he was. So it kind of swings both ways when it comes to the pendulum. Steph, if you had to rank, these 3, how would you have it ranked?
I think I would still have Mahomes. I think I wouldn't disagree. I think it would come down to trying to break down between the 2 of them. But I always say this to Chase. It's so hard for me. I wish it was just tiers and they were kind of like floating in the tier because I hate to put a number on them. So I do think I would end up probably putting Kyler over Josh Allen, just looking into the next season maybe. But I don't totally disagree with having him ahead. But yeah, it would probably be Mahomes, Kyler, and then Allen.
Where Kyler could really skyrocket for me is if they actually invest a little bit more in that offensive line. That offensive line was something that it's not torn apart by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely not up to par of what it could be. So sitting there and adding to this offensive line, I think, makes a huge, I'm talking about astronomical difference as to whether or not, Kyler Murray is going to be above Josh Allen this upcoming year. But I was also a little bit worried about the injuries and some of the, nicks and bumps and bruises that Kyler got. It's something to just keep an eye on moving forward. Mike, are you a little bit nervous at all with Kyler Murray?
I guess in the sense of using it to debate between him and Josh Allen, I would use that as all right, that's a point for Allen. You don't have to really worry about that as much. But that's to the extent. I know when Kyler Murray was coming out of college, there was talks about, is he too small or whatever. He's held up for 2 seasons now, and I know last year his numbers really did take a hit when he suffered that shoulder injury. But a lot of quarterbacks, it's a violent game. A lot of quarterbacks take some big hits like that. So I know you can speak better to it than I can, but as of now, I am not worried about Kyler's health at all.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing, and I think I told Chase this too, is It's so with very mobile quarterbacks, you do have to worry because they do have a higher risk of getting injured. So now I'm kind of retracting my statement. I almost maybe would put Allen over Murray for that fact is that I get very nervous when players like him, like Lamar, these guys that are very mobile because they just have a much higher risk of getting hurt because they have a higher chance of getting touched than everyone else.
I think a big thing too is looking at, Josh Allen and of course Ryan Dable coming back, right? Because Brian Dable was such a huge, massive influence on him, and to be able to get them both, in the same roof again for another season, we can only see him grow, especially if he spends the offseason with Jordan Palmer again, So
why he's not a head coach, I have no idea.
No one knows.
I don't think he wants it, man. I don't think that Jordan Palmer wants to coach, because if he wanted to coach, I'm sure a team would pay him astronomical numbers in order to get him on that team. His salary would probably be more than a lot of offensive coordinators would be.
Yeah,
he would deserve it.
It's like Patrick Graham. He definitely could have gotten a head coaching position if he wanted it.
He might make more money in a summer than a coach makes in an entire year. I'm just saying, that's very possible. So, all right, let's go ahead and bounce over this next question, because this one was something that, it kind of had me off put a little bit, but I understand where you're coming from, because you had Lamar Jackson, who he did fall a little bit behind this past year, and he wasn't great, but last year we're sitting there and we're looking at him as a top 2, locked to be top 3 minimum. So obviously you moved him down your rankings. You don't have to discuss where exactly you moved him unless you want to, but sitting there is Lamar Jackson, is his floor still as a top 3 option? And you're just, a little bit worried about the risk, or do you not think that he can get back up to that top 3 potential again?
I do think his ceiling is top 3. I think his ceiling is QB1 because he can do something that no quarterback ever has been able to do, and it's run like he does. Before Lamar Jackson entered the NFL, in the 60-plus years that we had, there was one quarterback who rushed for 1,000 yards ever. He's done it now 2 times in a row. Yep. It is just unheard of how great he is as a runner. The issue was this past season, we really saw it. The passing, we all expected regression, but I myself did not expect regression nearly as hard as we saw it. I thought that having to play the fourth quarter some games would help mitigate that regression that we were expecting to come to Lamar Jackson. But part of why I have him at 6 is just because of the quarterback position and the depth of it. We were talking about the big 3 that I have as the first 3 already. And then in between those guys and Lamar, I'll give it away. It's Dak Prescott, who I absolutely love. I think he was going to break records this past year before he got hurt. And I think that he is going to just come back and not really miss a step and be the Dak of old. And Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's the only player in fantasy to score over 320 fantasy points 3 years in a row. We just this past year were worrying about him because he lost his best weapon in D-Hop, and he put up best season of his career. So I still have Watson ahead of him just because I think Watson is safer. But then after that, I think Lamar, if you want to put Lamar at 4 or 3, to me, these top 6, 7 quarterbacks are so close that you can kind of just move them around in any order, and I really can't argue it too much.
I think in my own rankings, and I will never post my rankings because I think Twitter is a brutal place, but I think I have him at 7 or 8. He definitely fell for me. I think it's understandable too, but I think he could go one of 2 ways. I think he could either stay where he is, or he could end up doing much better. But I think that he might plateau here at this 7th, 8th spot that for me, I have him in.
So, yeah, I completely agree with all that. But the biggest thing that I looked at was, sitting there and looking at, I guess, his early season production, right? Because if we look at his early season production, it was absolutely brutal, and it scared a lot of people off, and it also lost a lot of people leagues. But, as it progressed, it slowly got better. Last 5 weeks of the season, the wild card round, it was a completely different animal, and they actually had him with the designed runs, which, is the reason why you draft Lamar Jackson. When it came to the first 6 weeks, he only had 1 game with double-digit rushing attempts. Then following the bye in week 7, he only had 1 total week for the rest of the season that he did not have double-digit rushing attempts. There were 4 weeks where he was more like he was trying to escape pressure and he was scrambling, and it wasn't so much design runs. But then he started getting hurt, so they ended up doing design runs because they figured, hey, we can't have him, back here taking these hits and getting blindsided. We need to design these runs because he's actually really good at absorbing pressure or absorbing hits, I should say. So sitting there and looking at the final weeks of the season, I mean, he was scoring touchdowns, 2 or 3 touchdowns in almost every single game. If he's coming to me at like the 6th quarterback off the board, like I think that you have to take him at that point, because you do have Deshaun Watson, who has a little bit of an injury history to an extent, and we don't know what his situation is going to be. Meanwhile, you sit there and you look at Dak Prescott and the instability of everything that's happening with that organization. I love Dak and actually had Dak above Lamar Jackson this past year. But honestly, at that point, I think I might take Dak Prescott over Lamar Jackson. I'm sorry, take Lamar Jackson over Dak Prescott.
What?
I think I'm
going Dak.
I have to see.
Jeez.
I have to see.
I'm so annoyed with you right now.
I seriously have to see how the wide receiver position shakes out. But he looked better as a passer overall throughout the season. He got more efficient, and him and Marquise Hollywood Brown, dude, they were on the same page, and they looked really good moving forward.
It's still Dak.
Okay, so I do real quick, Mike. I got the last one, which is, this was probably my favorite, like the hottest take that you had, and I absolutely loved it, because you closed out with 2 rookies in the last 3 picks for your top 12. There's a little bit of a surprise for one of the rookies who finished above Burrow. Who was it, and why'd you take him there?
So I have Jalen Hurts as my QB 10 over in these rankings, and it sounds more and more every day like he is going to be the starter in Philly, and they're somehow going to get a lot for Carson Wentz, and that would be amazing, because coming into last season in the NFL draft, I remember I just kept saying, like, this is Lamar Jackson 2.0. Maybe he's not as good as Lamar Jackson, but the closest thing to a pure running quarterback that we're going to have outside of Lamar. And he showed that this past year in the limited exposure that he got. In the 3 full games he played, he rushed for at least 60 yards in each of them. His first game as a starter was against the New Orleans Saints, who hadn't allowed a 100-yard rusher in 50 games at that point. 50! That's almost 5 seasons worth. And he went out, and him and Miles Sanders put up over 100 yards rushing that game, because it just shows you how hard he is to stop. And he showed us that rushing ability gives him a floor of like 18 fantasy points every week. But then, he also exploded for nearly 40 in one game, showing the upside that he has. So to me, if I miss out on those top 8 or 9 quarterbacks, then I think like Jalen Hurts is the clear one that I want to pivot to, because who knows what he can do as a passer. He looks solid as a passer at the NFL level. I think like he won't completely drag your fantasy numbers down, and the floor and the ceiling is just so much. It's so elevated because of what he can give you with his legs, that I really like Jalen Hurts, and I'm expecting to have a whole lot of him in best ball drafts this year.
Steph, I need to know. How you feeling about Hurts?
I have him really low.
Is this because what happened in week 17?
No, I'm not being sensitive to it. I don't I appreciate his running value that he can add, and I love that, but the way he throws the football makes me uncomfortable. So I get uncomfortable when I watch him throwing the football. So I think if I had him around like 24, 23, I'm not a huge fan, but I also don't think we didn't get a lot of him. I think a lot of it also is with the franchise itself. This is one where Chase doesn't trust the Cowboys. I don't trust the Eagles. I don't like what they're doing over there. I have bad feelings about it. It doesn't settle well. So I have him still low. I mean, I think he definitely has breakout potential. I definitely appreciate his running and what he is, but something about the way that boy throws a football reminds me of like Napoleon Dynamite, like what's his name? It's so weird.
He does have a weird throw motion,
it's
but
weird. I never played football, so I don't know, and I don't know what they tell you about practice, but something about the way he throws the football with his arms just doesn't look great.
Well, the biggest thing for me that I was like sitting there looking at was, and at first I was all over this take, and I was like, dude, this is a great take. Like, people are going to go crazy for this. And I try to get behind it, right? I'm sitting there, I'm like, how can I make sure that I twist this, right? To where like I'm completely supporting this. And I was sitting there, I was looking at it, and like the health and the age of the offensive line is a concern for me. And the wide receiver room just isn't good. Like, they don't have any talent in the wide receiver room. So I don't even know what's going to happen with Wentz, obviously, moving forward, but it is looking like Jalen Hurts is going to be the starter. But the biggest thing that kind of hit me was how they build teams, both Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. When Nick Sirianni came on as the offensive coordinator for the Colts with Reich, they immediately went into rebuild mode, and they had 9 picks in the first 3 rounds over the first 2 years. So when we sit there and we look at it, they took 2 guards and they did take 1 receiver. The other 6 of those were on defense. Then when I looked at Howie Roseman, with the Eagles, they did take, they did take Carson Wentz with a first pick, and I believe they took another offensive player. They only had 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, but then the following year, they used all 3 picks on defensive players. Where I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the weakness of the Eagles is pretty much on the defensive side and in the secondary outside of the aging offensive line. So sitting there and looking at the fact that Howie Roseman has drafted 6 of the past 7 picks in the first 3 rounds being offensive players, it just makes me a little bit nervous that they're not going to help out Hurts as much as they possibly could. I mean, if they do, we're talking about games where he's going to absolutely blow up. I mean, we sit there and we look at the fantasy points he put up and how he destroyed teams like you brought up with New Orleans. I mean, that's tremendous. That's absolutely insane. But is this something as to where we actually see them adding help? And I just don't know if that's a guarantee. Are you thinking, Mike, that they could actually add help to this offense in the offseason, or do you think they're going to focus more in on their defense?
I'm very hopeful that they add a receiver. Like, I believe in Jalen Reagor still. I don't want to write him off after just one bad season, a weird year for rookies too. I still think he could play at this level. Travis Fulgham, I mean, I was all excited about him that month or so that he had, and then he's really fallen off. But they cannot come into this year with Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson atop that depth chart once again. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I'm sorry, it looks like it's just never going to happen for him at the NFL level. Dallas Goedert is the one piece I think you feel okay right now about in the passing game outside of maybe Reagor, but I'm hoping that they sign someone or draft do something to give your young quarterback that you're looking to build around, like give him a chance at least. That is the new blueprint in the NFL. You load your young rookie quarterback or young quarterback with a load of weapons around him, and just so you give him a fair chance. Like that's what the Eagles need to do with Hurts here. They need to give him something to work with on offense, and I do think they will.
We'll see if Nick Sirianni thinks he's smart enough to coach an offense that can end up, beating the system without the players, right? Because it's all about the system. It's not about the talent. It's all about the system, right? That was his press conference. He came out. He's like, I don't care about the talent. We just need to get an easy system in place. So it'll be interesting to see if they do invest in this offense or if they just go all defense for this. Now, sitting there and looking at it with the running backs, and, I was reading over your article and your rankings. I love the fact that you actually put Dalvin Cook up there. I believe you had him as your RB2 possibly.
Yep.
And I honestly, I don't love it because I think that Dalvin Cook is the second best running back. I love it because you have to minimize risk. And sitting there and looking at, Alvin Kamara with the potential risk, of having a new quarterback, of having a completely different system in place, is this why you actually went that route, or was there another reason for it?
No, that was 100% the reason. I am as awesome as Alvin Kamara is. And oddly enough, I was someone at this time last year, banging the table saying this guy is still a top 5 pick because everyone overreacts after a season. And after 2019, there was a lot of concern about Kamara, and it just never made any sense to me. And then he balled out this past year. Everyone knows that he literally won more people championships this year than anyone else. So it was awesome if you had him. But we saw that month stretch without Drew Brees, and maybe it won't be Taysom Hill starting for the Saints next year. Maybe it'll be Jameis Winston, which I think would be a ton of fun for fantasy.
Yes.
But either, and that's all I care about. Outside of my favorite team, all I care about is what's most fun and best for fantasy. But with Taysom Hill, and even if it's Winston, they're not going to throw the ball, at least in my estimation, they're not going to throw the ball nearly 10 times per game to a running back like Drew Brees has done each of the last few seasons. He routinely sees 8+ targets each game. And in that month, his fantasy points, the targets, the catches all decreased by over 50%. So to me, it is a huge question mark. And if it's Taysom Hill as the starter, that's obviously hurts more than if it's Winston, I think. But either way, I think is a knock on the value of Alvin Kamara.
Steph, if you had to put Dalvin Cook in a ranking, where are you sitting there? Are you thinking that he could be the number 2, or are you fading him a little bit higher?
I don't know that I'm putting him at number. I don't know.
Who do you have higher, Saquon Barkley or Dalvin Cook?
I have Saquon higher, but my whole spiel about his injury, so I won't get into it. But yeah, I'm definitely putting Saquon still higher. I think that I think he would fall right behind him, though. I don't think. I think you guys are right with the risk with him. I think he gets forgotten about a lot when I'm reading these rankings. I feel like people are forgetting about Cook and how excellent he is. He's still he's excellent. So he's got to still be in the top 4. I don't know why anyone would put him outside of it, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, can you actually go into why Saquon Barkley's injury isn't as bad as what some people are, being led to believe real quick?
Yeah, sure. For those of you that didn't hear my rehab report last night, and I'm writing an article, if I can ever get the balls to just record the video, I will post a video on it, but for some reason I can't record unless it's live. So with Saquon, someone that you can compare his injury to is Adrian Peterson, but Saquon's actually in a way better situation. He did a prehab, which is something that they don't do with every player. It's a newer thing, a newer intervention, so to say, where Saquon, they didn't do a surgery for 6 weeks after his injury. So what that allowed for is it allowed for swelling to go down. It allowed for him to his range of motion back. This is why you saw him on a bike outside of a club a week before his surgery, because he got his range of motion back, was able to walk better. So when they went in to do surgery, his MCL actually healed completely on its own. When they did the surgery, only his ACL had to have reconstruction. His meniscus got completely salvaged. They were able to repair it. Usually they have to actually remove the meniscus, which leaves people in a really crappy position when it comes to arthritis and longevity. So Saquon's in a really, really good place, especially looking at Adrian Peterson. This is why I use him as an example, is their surgeries are as similar as you could find, but think of things, we're now almost 10 years more advanced. So he got his surgery in 2011, came back for 2012. It might have been the same season, but came back for 2012. And then he could not have gotten more accolades that year, and then followed by 2013. So I'm very high on Saquon this season. This has nothing to do with me being a New York Giants fan. It's just the fact that the way that they handled his treatment medically is so beautiful. So I think that he will be in a good position. And that is my spiel on Saquon Barkley.
And Michael Davis brings up in the comments that, he doesn't know if it's going to be there. But honestly, it's, you should feel very warm and fuzzy inside with this type of treatment that he did go through, in order to return to his, 2019
right.
form.
And then you also look at his age. So the research shows, under 25 years old, these players are coming back with essentially no issue. Adrian Peterson later on actually needed surgery on his meniscus. Doing this prehab kind of prevents Saquon from ever necessarily going through that. So I'm very high on Saquon still. I think that I'm more worried about CMC than I am Saquon. So I'm still very high on Saquon, and I'm not going to come down from that until someone pushes me off.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can you explain why with CMC? Because my thinking was, like, everything you said makes me feel really good about Saquon.
Yeah.
But this was still like a really severe injury, whereas CMC was kind of like not as severe, I thought, but way better. So I'm really curious.
Yeah, and I don't want to think that I know way better, but so my thing with ACLs is it's not this death wish that for some reason everyone wants us to believe. I mean, Tom Brady tore his ACL. People forget, right? Gronk, I could name, they just won a Super Bowl. So people tear their ACL all the time. We have great interventions for CMC. I don't know. And I think this might be me being, because I did start reading more about his injuries. I'm a little nervous how limited the information was on his injury. So it was like he would try to come back and then something else went wrong. And then he would try to come back again and something else went wrong. It was like several injuries all in one season. I think Galladay is kind of the same way. I don't like when we don't have a lot of information on them. It should be more clear cut. What's the injury? What are they doing about it? Period. So I don't like when I don't know what the situation is. It's the same thing. Julio Jones always has these weird injuries where no one really knows what's going on. All of a sudden he's fine. So CMC is going to be the next one that I tackle into. So I don't have a full direct answer, but I don't like when I don't have a clear idea of what the problem is. It shouldn't be that hard. The body is very simple. What's the injury and what are you doing about it?
Yeah, Steph was hitting on that the entire season. Like every time we did an injury report, which are normally Tuesdays at 8:00, we, she covered. She's like, if they're not giving me more information, I don't trust it. Like I cannot hop on this. And normally they ended up missing more time than what was expected every time that we got this limited, amount of insight. So it's kind of funny how, you sit there and you look at the limited amount of insight, how teams try and hide it. It's for one of two reasons. Either the player might be more hurt and they want teams to have to prepare for that player being in, although the team knows that they're not, right? Just simple chess when it comes to that. Or they want to try and keep that player and hold him over until the next year because they might not have a successful season. Typically, that doesn't happen until the very end of the season, though. And we've seen that, through weeks, 12 through 17 or so, where teams just have a losing record. They don't want to get their star hurt, so they hold them out. With CMC, it's got to be one of the two. And on a 50-50, I don't know if I'd take that chance, especially with the amount of workload that CMC's already got.
And my thing too is really quick, and then I'll shut up because I'm sure everyone's so sick of me talking. But with CMC and Saquon, they have a similar issue where they both need more support on the team. So both of these players, it really, really depends on how these players really handle the offseason. So the teams handle the off season, because if they're not getting the support, they're just going to get abused even more. And then it's just going to be the same story all over again. But this isn't uncommon for these like star running backs like this. They're going to, if they don't have help, they're going to be the work mule, and then they end up getting hurt.
All right, Mike, I got a question for you now. We're going to bounce this back over since you are the guest. And the biggest thing that I noticed in the running back positions, probably one of my favorite takes, was Aaron Jones and how high you had him up there, right? Because Aaron Jones, he could end up being a huge hit. He can end up being a huge miss. And honestly, I hated him playing for Green Bay. It wasn't the right system for him where they run a wide zone, run scheme. So sitting there and looking at it, A.J. Dillon is the perfect person to, replace him. And we saw A.J. Dillon succeed multiple times. I don't see Aaron Jones going back. Do you?
Originally I didn't, but the fact that they're gonna allow one of him or Jamal Williams for sure to walk. The fact though that they haven't really invested in a whole lot of I know they took Dillon, but outside of him, man, did they need playmakers on the offensive side of the ball? And the fact that we just saw Aaron Rodgers put up, I thought Aaron Rodgers was on the downside of his career, and he just went out and nearly 50 touchdowns. I think second straight year in the NFC Championship game, I think that they are going to once again try to go for it with Aaron Rodgers while he still has this open window. And because of that, that means that maybe they do, in fact, bring back Aaron Jones. I do agree with you. I don't think him and Green Bay are a perfect fit. In fact, it's been nothing but, despite him being the RB2 in 2019 and the RB, I believe he was the RB5 this past year, it's been pretty frustrating for if you have Aaron Jones, because there's so much times when he's just taken off the field for Jamal Williams or whatever the case may be. So I did put it in the article. I said, obviously, wherever he ends up is going to impact his ranking. But I actually think it could make you feel a little bit better, too, if he goes somewhere where he is the clear-cut lead running back who is going to get, 60+% of the work there in that backfield, because that's just not the case in Green Bay for him.
You just put a huge smile on my face, right? Because I have him projected to go to two places, but one place in particular that I have him locked in at. And I've been saying this since October of 2019, when I saw the contracts running up and how they were, running a different system. At first, when the 2019 season started, I was sitting there looking at the scheme that they're going to run and everything like that. I was like, Aaron Jones doesn't fit into this, but I'm not going to sit there and just jump on a bandwagon. Maybe he does, and I'm just not seeing it. Maybe they changed his body type. It hasn't changed at all. It's literally been the same exact show that we saw in 2019, back in 2020 again, except for the fact that they would take him out in 2019 a lot more often because he would run zigzags behind the offensive line. And I got that information from Next Gen Stats, right? Where he would run back and forth. He wouldn't do this, diagonal cut to the tackle or to the tight end and then find the crease and run upfield. Whenever he had multiple runs where he was running back and forth behind the offensive line, he would end up getting pulled and have a ton less carries in those games. So sitting there and looking into it, I was like, man, where do I want him to go? And I think the best landing spot for him is actually the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Arizona Cardinals are a smash spot. Get rid of Kenyon Drake. Aaron Jones is a better version of Kenyon Drake. He might not be as great behind the tackles, but he still is very, very good between the tackles. he still is very, very good between the tackles. And I think that he's somebody that could absolutely smash faces if he gets paired up with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray doesn't target the running backs a whole ton, but Mike, what do you think about that take? Like, is that somewhere where you would see Aaron Jones potentially raise up your rankings if he landed there?
Yeah, I don't know how, because I have a top 6 right now that I really, really like. So I don't know if I can move him up a whole lot higher than 7. But yeah, that would be an amazing landing spot if he landed there. Just the thought of Kyler Murray and Aaron Jones running the option together. Just
You guys are in la la land. La la land. Listen to me. I promise you, Aaron Jones is not going to the Arizona Cardinals.
You can't promise that.
Just
It
like
would be fun.
I can promise.
It would be so much fun. I would be like a kid in the candy store. I'd watch every single Arizona Cardinals game.
Never gonna happen. I think that's
They
so
have the cap space. They can make this happen if they don't invest too much
They're
in the
not
defense.
franchise to do that.
Oh,
they
man.
need to get him someone other than D-Hop.
They got Kenyon Drake, right? They went and traded for Kenyon Drake and then signed him to a 10-year or a $10 million contract, right? Wasn't that his contract?
And he's a free agent now too. So
yep, it was a 1-year contract. And Chase Edmonds can't stay healthy.
You continue to convince yourself.
I don't know if it's going to happen. It would just be a lot of fun if it did.
It would be a blast. I agree.
My second one was the Dolphins. Steph, which one do you like more, Arizona Cardinals or the Dolphins?
I like Dolphins better.
Mike, what about you?
I think the Dolphins is maybe a little bit more realistic, but because now I have all these doubts about the Cardinals, but I think that would be the much more fun landing spot for fantasy, at least.
Of course.
God, so much more fun.
Yeah.
So much more fun.
I like to think outside of the fantasy realm, which is what baseball hates. It's like you got to think outside of it and what's a little bit more realistic.
By the way, Steph, did you know that we have pins? We have pins now for fantasy intervention. We've got pins.
I know. You love pins.
I love pins.
You can get a chance to look at the pins.
Actually, I have a few pins right here, Steph. You want to see them?
Yes. No, I don't want to see them. Please.
I collect pins for my bartending. So we got pins in for fantasy intervention. Make sure you guys go check it out. fantasyintervention.com. Go to get some gear and grab a pin. We're going to start collecting pins. We're going to make a fantasy community that collects pins. We're going to do it. Go to fantasyintervention.com. Go get some gear. Let's collect some pins, guys. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in to the next part. And Steph, you're going to love this. You're going to love this take.
What? It's so exciting.
You're going to love it.
So.
Okay. Can you please tell Steph where you have Zeke ranked among your running backs?
So when this came out, he was RB12. And since then, the Matt Stafford trade has taken place, which means that Ezekiel Elliott would fall to at least RB13, not being an RB1 in these rankings.
Oh, man.
This guy was great. so hyped. Oh, that makes me so happy.
I told you like it. I'm sitting there. I'm a fan of Zeke. I have him, I believe, like RB7 or 8 right now. So it's somewhere as to where I see a better offensive line. I see Dak Prescott. He produced when Dak was there to an extent. I mean, not great like he was, but once they replace that center position, get it reinforced, I see him, moving up. But with that being said, why do you have Zeke so far down your rankings?
So it does feel a little bit dirty having Zeke ranked this low because since he's entered the NFL, it's been not even think about it. He is a top 5 fantasy pick. The one year we had to think about it was that year that 8-game suspension was looming over his head. But I look at what he did this year, and he was a lot better with Dak and those first 5 weeks of the season. He was averaging over 23 fantasy points per game to just under 12 without Dak Prescott. And I know the O-line really got banged up as the year went on, but his rushing yards per game has decreased every year since he's entered the NFL. And this past year, it was at a career low 65.3. But it's not just that too. It's the fact that he picked up this past year a career low in yards after contact. And before anyone says, they had O-line issues and there was no Dak and everything, it was lower in the 5 games with the O-line and with Dak than it was after that. So to me, the fact that Zeke is getting up there in age and he's averaged over 330 touches per year as a running back in the NFL, it has me concerned that maybe we were starting to see the early signs of decline. And then I'm a big believer I'd rather be a year early than a year late on getting off a player.
Yeah, of
Maybe
course.
Zeke could still be Zeke again this year, but I think we're starting to see the early signs. And with a running back, it just happens, man.
Well, that was pretty much my question was like, is he, hitting that DeMarco Murray, that Shady McCoy level yet, where we're just going to see him drop off from here on out?
I can't say that with 100. Like I said it on the NFL podcast. I joke around a lot about players being on Team Washed, and Zeke is not a member of Team Washed yet, but he is applying. He is like on the line. Like he may be trying out for them next year. Like it is a very real possibility that the wheels just fall off. And let's not act like they don't have another great, capable running back just waiting in the wings if Zeke slows down.
There, and I mean. So for his rushing yards, his 2 best years were 2016, 2018. Since then, it's like whatever. I mean, it's fine, but then the past 2 years have just not been as impressive as everyone thinks. I'm just not impressed with him. And I think with everything going on over there, with the way that the Cowboys, the way they move, I think that the Cowboys are the type of team that could very easily take another wide receiver in the draft because they love a big name. Like that's just how it goes. Like they'll take the sexiest name that is sitting there waiting for them. But I think that with CeeDee Lamb, they have so many other options with Dak coming back. I mean, Zeke is they'll try to force him in the playbook again. They won't make a playoff run. It'll be the same old Cowboys, and Zeke will fall off, and then we'll be putting him on Team Wash next year.
Team Wash. I love that so much. I really do. This draft is Kenny Gainwell, right? Kenny Gainwell, who played behind Tony Pollard, and he'll end up crushing faces at the NFL level. I'm so excited for Kenny Gainwell. Give me a year to get him back in football shape because he opted out this year. He didn't want to play. So give me a year to sit in the wing and then roll out Kenny Gainwell and Tony Pollard together. But then Tony Pollard's going to become obsolete because Kenny Gainwell is so much better anyways. I love it. Love it. All right. So let's go ahead and hop onto the wide receivers. Calvin Ridley, like at first when I was sitting there, I was looking at his rankings. I was like, dude, that feels really hot. But I've been so busy, working with the website and trying to develop stuff. I never did an end of the season, review. I never checked out where people ended up. I never had a chance to. So I'm sitting there and I was like going through it. And I'm like, man, where did he finish this year? Right. And you have him as wide receiver 5. Meanwhile, he finished as wide receiver 5 on the season.
Really?
He did. He finished wide receiver 5.
I hate him for some reason. And I don't know why. Is it I can't trust him? I don't know why I'm so butthurt on him.
My wide receiver top 5s are boring. They are literally in the exact order in which they finished this year. Because it's hard to, like, outside of maybe Ridley, the top 4, like, how can you argue them? Like, Devontae, Hill, Stephon Diggs, D-Hop. Like, they're going to be.
They just shouldn't be floating. I just want all floating, and it's like, pick one.
That's because like wide receivers are so inconsistent, right? Like there are very few wide receivers who actually, land in a consistent base and get the targets every week. I mean, we look at the volatility of the position year in and year out, and the volatility of the position is absolutely like mind blowing as to where I think when I did the research, it's something like 30% of the wide receiver ones actually finish as a wide receiver 1 on a week to week basis. So each week, there's only 30% of the people that would finish as a wide receiver 1 in that section. That could be completely wrong, by the way, but it's somewhere in that range. I got to go back and look at my notes. Anyways, sitting there and looking at it, in your breakdown that you did, I think the most surprising thing was his red zone targets. I did not expect that. Is he set up to be the alpha in this offense next year? Is he going to see the same amount of red zone targets? Like, what's going to happen for him in 2021? That you can project.
Yeah, I trust the red zone and end zone targets because since he's entered the NFL, like that is the way the Falcons have utilized him. And remember back his rookie year, the knock was he was great, but he's not going to be able to keep scoring touchdowns at this rate. So, and then that's why people were a little bit lower on him going into his second season. This past year, there was a lot of people, myself included, who had him kind of picked as this year's Chris Godwin, and I think he did hit on that. He wasn't as good as Godwin was, but he finished as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver.
That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, exactly. He was better without Julio Jones, I will say, but what I'm expecting is what we saw take place 10 years ago when Julio kind of, his first couple of years showcased like, hey, I can ball in the NFL. Like you guys found yourself a alpha wide receiver, and then they kind of cast aside Roddy White, and we saw a year or two where Julio was the alpha between those two before Roddy kind of faded. I think that's what we're going to get here. Like, I think Julio Jones is going to be 32 years old. That's about when you have to start worrying about wide receivers. Julio is still Julio. I think he could still be very, very good. But I think Calvin Ridley is starting to ascend, and I think actually going to surpass him as this team's wide receiver 1 this season. Julio Hive, I am sorry. Please do not come in my mentions.
I like Julio a lot. I think this almost kind of bodes more towards the time with the Colts when we had Marvin Harrison and, of course, Reggie Wayne. And he was that second fiddle. I do love Roddy White, but, sitting there looking at it, I think Julio Jones was superior when it came to athleticism and his profile. I don't know if Calvin Ridley is ever going to hit the peak that Julio Jones hit. Steph, where are you sit with this? Do you think that Calvin Ridley could ever hit that Julio Jones-esque, level of talent?
I think that you're convincing me a little bit. I think Julio Jones, and for everyone that does watch the report, I have said continuously Julio Jones is a pain in my ass. I am not a fan of him in fantasy. This is a guy that they say he's hurt, then he comes in, then he plays until the third quarter, and then he's out again. And it's just, he's like, it's just too stressful for me. I have enough stress. Julio Jones is not the thorn in my side that I need. I think that, it's interesting because probably before we sat here and talked, I think that he does have that potential. I think there's always something hindering him, but I'm still not high on him. I think Julio will always be better than him, but we'll have to see. I don't trust that. But that's another organization I don't really trust. You have to see how it goes over there.
How many receivers over there have over 10,000 yards receiving for the Falcons in their career?
One. I'm kidding.
Not a whole lot.
I'm sitting there. I was looking it up because I wanted to see the transition, see if they had somebody prior to. And I knew that they did, but I didn't realize how early it was. They only have 2. It's Julio Jones, Roddy White. Terrence Mathis, who retired in 2001 or left the team in 2001, had 7,349. And then, of course, Roddy White was drafted in 2005. God, but I'm looking at it, and it's like Julio Jones has, he's on his 9th year, or he's about to walk into his 10th year. Meanwhile, that's exactly what Roddy White had was, 10 years with the team. So it'd be interesting to see if they move on from Julio Jones after 10 years as well. Just curious about it.
It's definitely possible. He though could prove a lot of people wrong because he is such a freak athlete that he can have an extended run past 32.
Yeah.
Is Calvin Ridley ready to be the alpha receiver over there, or do you think they draft somebody? Because I actually have them in the draft for my projections taking, I think, Jamar Chase, I believe.
What?
With their 4th overall pick.
I believe Calvin Ridley is an alpha.
Do you think that they could take a wide receiver here?
I think with all of their needs, I do think they can.
They have a ton of needs.
But with all of their needs, I don't think wide receiver. I wouldn't, if I was in charge of making their pick, I wouldn't take a wide receiver. But I wouldn't have thought the Cowboys would have drafted CeeDee Lamb last year. So anything is possible.
Well, the bigger thing too is, and this kind of puts a damper on my argument, but they have Arthur Smith, right, as their head coach. They're going to run a wide zone run scheme. That's what, he's always been running. That's what he ran last year with the Titans. So, I don't know if they actually will dive into doing more 3 wide receiver sets and trying to get, him implemented or integrated in the offense. So, maybe in the 3rd, 4th round, but I just love the thought of them taking Jamar Chase and turning him into the next superstar over there, because that's what they do. So let's go ahead and hop into this next question, because the biggest shocker for me on the entire thing, more so than Jalen Hurts, right, was Keenan Allen. Oh my God. You have Keenan Allen one spot after Ridley over there at wide receiver 6.
Oh, so,
yeah. What's going on with that? Please tell me. Please enlighten me, sir.
I love Keenan Allen, and I always have. I back to the days where I was defending him for not being injury prone because he missed time 2 years in a row. One, his spleen ruptured. I am no doctor, but I do not think that it would constitute as injury prone. And then he tore his ACL the next year. And I was like, unless these are repeat injuries that I like.
Exactly.
But so go fast forward then to 2020, right? And I was off of Keenan Allen last year because of Tyrod Taylor. I thought they were going to be a run-heavy team, throw a lot to Austin Eckler. And for the first time in my fantasy football career, I guess, I was off of Keenan Allen. And I regretted it so much from week 2 on. because there were 11 games last year where Justin Herbert started and Keenan Allen finished. And in those 11 games, Allen averaged over 20 fantasy points, over 12 targets per game, 83 yards per game, and a 29% target share, which would have been second in the NFL, only behind Devontae Adams. So I think that Justin Herbert is kind of like Keenan Allen's been great with Phillip Rivers. Justin Herbert could take him to that next level, I think.
What if the Chargers end up drafting a guy because Mike Williams might not resign? Hunter Henry is most likely not going to resign. What if they end up deciding to draft a stud wide receiver, somebody like, I don't know, Jamar Chase? No, but any one of these wide receivers who could be a superstar.
I think it helps Keenan Allen because if Williams and Hunter Henry leave, you're going to need someone else that could come in and be a second piece there that helps take attention away from Keenan Allen because the defense then is just going to focus in on him. I also think that Keenan is is such a unique talent because he is not just, a one-trick pony. Like, he is not the best field stretcher in the NFL, but he can get downfield, all right. He is one of the absolute best route runners, though, and creates separation and gets open so fast that I do not see this offense kind of changing from what it is, and that is just a passing game that runs through Keenan Allen.
That's interesting. I mean, are you that high on Keenan Allen stuff, or is he falling outside your top 12?
God, I haven't gotten to wide receiver yet, but I would imagine he's not in my top 10. So he's definitely not injury prone, but I feel like he's another one that when I think of, I just think of inconsistency for some reason. Maybe that's
big,
so I have a hard time drafting people that if I don't know that I can play them. I hate those players where you're sitting to set your lineup and I'm like, fuck. Are they gonna actually perform this week, or are we gonna have a dud week? What's gonna happen? Talk to me, baby boy. What are we doing this week? So that's where I get stressed out. And Keenan Allen, he's one of those players I think of, just like Julio Jones, is like, what are we doing this week? Is it gonna happen? Are we gonna do a full force hit on this, or are we not going to do that? So he stresses me out. I stay away from Keenan Allen. I have for years. I respect it, but he is on my no thank you list.
Steph, we almost got through a full show without you cussing. We almost got through a full show. We were literally a few minutes away from ending it. And oh my God.
I did my best. I think I said shit before.
Oh, did you? My bad. All right. So sitting there looking at it, literally in my notes. In my notes, the biggest concern, for me was the ticky-tack type injuries that hinders production from week to week and his consistency. But this past year, he was far more consistent than what we've seen. His floors weren't nearly as low, so they didn't lose you weeks in most weeks. Before we've seen from Keenan Allen weeks where you play him and he puts up, 0 receptions, maybe 1 reception for 10 yards, and he's, completely destroys you. But without Phillip Rivers at the helm, and having Josh Herbert, it does make sense. I don't know if I'm half as high as 6, but I can understand why he'd move up rankings. Although I'm not a huge Keenan Allen fan. I don't know why. I just can't get on board. But it does make sense moving forward to have him higher up on my rankings. And you actually convinced me. I adjusted my rankings after reading your article the other day. So, and then looking up into the research. But DJ Moore, right? You have an honorable mentions segment, Mike. You have an honorable mentions segment, and DJ Moore was not even brought up. What is going on, man? He wasn't even brought up.
He probably should have been. I probably, because here's the thing, right? In my opinion, I think there's a top 11 consensus, and Keenan Allen is a part of it. I'm also for years, I've been really high on Allen Robinson, and so I think he is very much a part of that. But I think from wide receiver 12 to 25, you could move those names in any order you want.
For
a
sure.
floating tier would come in handy there every time.
It wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, exactly, because they're all so close in production and in talent and ability. So I think that DJ Moore very much so belongs in that tier 2 of wide receivers, like the 12 through 25 tier, the wide receiver 2s. I will say, though, that I personally have a little bit of a vendetta against DJ Moore because
So do I.
he burned me the first half of last year, and then I traded him, and then he decided to start playing better. So I did trade him in my biggest league for David Montgomery, so it's hard for me to complain too much. But I had some negative feelings towards DJ Moore for a lot of the 2020 season.
Are there any sites out there that you've came across which actually have double coverage rates? Because I know it's factored into DVOA, I believe, for Football Outsiders, but
PFF might have it.
I actually searched PFF, but they could have it. I just, I didn't have enough time to dive into it. But I every game that I watched with Carolina, because I love DJ Moore, and so I try and watch as much game film as I can with him. He was double covered or triple covered constantly. I mean, we sat there, we saw DJ Moore, and I had him in actually a DFS thing where I was winning big time money, and if he would have gotten a touchdown reception, I would have skyrocketed because his owner percentage was like at 1% or something like that. Anyways, Teddy Bridgewater threw an interception at the very end of the game because he was in triple coverage, and he was the only guy that Teddy Bridgewater trusted at that time. So I kind of want to see the rates as to how often he got covered like that, because I believe when CMC comes back, I don't think he's going to see as much double or bracketed coverage or triple coverage as he saw this entire season. And hopefully they use him in a different way outside of a deep threat, because he actually had his most amount of yards so far in his career, but he saw like 20 plus receptions less than what he saw in any other year. So, or I'm sorry, in last year. So sitting there and looking at it, I mean, DJ Moore, I feel like his value could only go up, but I feel like he's a major buy, especially for dynasty formats.
And I love that they've been tied to basically every quarterback that's been made available this offseason. So
yes.
I at the end of the season, thought they were just going to run it back with Teddy and be like, all right, he's not our long-term solution, but he's also not the reason why we're losing. But I love the fact that they're trying to upgrade the position. It only helps DJ Moore.
They're definitely going to draft a quarterback, I believe, in this draft if they don't try and go out, or if they don't succeed in going out and getting one. Steph, like, are you a fan of DJ Moore? Are you completely off this take? Like, how are you feeling?
I'm cool with I don't know that I would have honorable mentioned him. I don't know that I'm that high on him, but I agree in that sense. I think that I was telling you how Miami did that 2 quarterback switch. I could kind of see Carolina doing something like this, where maybe they draft someone, but they keep Teddy in for a while and they let him learn and absorb and maybe do something where they're switching them in and out. I don't really know. But I mean, I think that he can only get better from here. And what people don't realize coming from my injury side of things is whenever you get help for someone, it's going to let them increase their production and their productivity and their effectiveness and how well they play on the field. So having CMC come back, and it's only going to lead to better things for the two of them.
Yeah, and that's very, very true moving forward, and that actually could help out DJ Moore's, dynasty potential as we look forward to the upcoming years. I'm very stoked about DJ Moore and his value dropping this year, because you can get him for pretty much next to nothing at this point. Everybody's almost off him because he was supposed to be the Chris Godwin. This was supposed to be his Chris Godwin year, and that didn't happen. And I'm so excited that it did not happen, because I'm trying to acquire him everywhere, absolutely everywhere. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into an article you have not written yet, because I told you it was going to be on the show sheet, although I didn't have time to put it in. We're going to have a little bit of a debate, because you said there's only 3 tight ends worth owning in fantasy.
Basically. So I think there's only 3 tight ends that I would take probably in the single digit fantasy rounds. Like if I don't get Kelsey in the first round, and I think as early as 7 overall, I start thinking Travis Kelsey. Then if I don't get Waller or Kittle in rounds 2 or 3, I'm probably waiting. Like I did a best ball draft last night, and because it's February and I have a problem, but I love it. Yeah, I walked away from that draft with Irv Smith as my tight end 1 in rounds. I think I took him 10, Cole Kmet in 13, and OJ Howard in 17. And I was like, yeah, I'd rather do that than take like a 7th round Tyler Higbee or Hunter Henry or the E word. I won't say his name, but all of those upside tight ends that you pay for in like the 6th, 7th, 8th round that just you get burned every single year. So for me, it's either top tight end or wait.
Yep.
That's agree. Interesting, because there is one tight end that I think you're forgetting about, but sitting there.
Is that Hawkinson? Who? You love Hawkinson, don't you?
I do like Hawkinson.
Yes, Hawkinson. Come on. How can you not take
Hawkinson? I know him way too well. Like literally, it's getting disgusting. I know. But this is my thing. It's like the 3 of them. If we're doing the floating theory again, it's like 3 of them are over here, and then you have to go all the way over here, and there's maybe another 3 maybe, and then the rest can just go like fly a kite. I will not even touch them. I will try to draft someone in the rookie, like, I don't know. Hawkinson's fine.
Like Cooper, Hurst, they all burn you every single time. So I understand like the 7th to 8th round picks, but like, and I'm coming from more of a dynasty perspective. Although this year we don't even know if Kenny Golladay is going to resign. Like the number 1 pass catcher might not even be a wide receiver or a wide receiver period. It might be a tight end or a running back. You know, when it comes to DeAndre Swift. So sitting there and looking at it, I mean, Jared Goff has shown his propensity to love tight ends. Like he absolutely adores tight ends to an extent. You know, we saw it at the tail end of last year when the plays were getting called for tight ends. If they decide to start drawing up plays like that, and I know that, you know, the offensive staff isn't necessarily drawn towards that, but I mean, what other options would they have? Like Quintez Cephas, if they don't, you know, tag Golladay. Now, I do see them tagging Golladay, and I think that actually helps Hockenson out because I think that opens up the middle of the field a little bit more. Safeties have to drop back into deep coverage. I'm sitting there looking at Hockenson as a target hog. Like I'm talking about Darren Waller type targets, you know, easily. And I think he's a better tight end than Darren Waller. Not only that, but he's, you know, 5 years younger as well.
That's spicy.
That is a very hot take. That's almost as hot as you saying Cam Newton is staying on the Patriots.
So the biggest difference, like with Hockenson and Waller, or the biggest reason why I want to fade Hockenson from the Waller category. I still like Hockenson more, but the biggest reason why I would want to is because Hockenson had a wide open path. I think it was Thanksgiving Day or something like that. Had a wide open path to the end zone on one of his receptions and ran towards the defender. And I still, to this day, have no idea why he did that. Like he literally took a 90-degree angle, like towards the defender. And I still, like, my mind is blown.
Not running on that one play. He's like open wide and just like decided to throw the ball.
Yes, I mean, but he's a second-year guy. And the biggest thing is we see a lot of these tight ends, right? And I did a study last year. Once again, my computer is pretty much froze at this point, so I don't have opportunity to dive into all my old stats that I did research on. But it was something like 60% of the tight ends broke out by year 2, and 80% of the tight ends broke out by year 3 or 4. I think it was year 3 that make the Pro Bowl in multiple years and also have tight end 1 seasons on a regular basis. It's not often that they actually have this, but essentially Hockenson now is in that category. And if he doesn't break out this year, then, you know, I'm renouncing my fandom for him, but he's right there on the edge of it. And, you know, without having a great defense over there, you know, having the opportunities, I love Hockenson, you know, moving forward, especially for Dynasty, obviously, but even for 2021, I'm loading up on him by the 6th round or so. If he's there in the 6th round, I'm taking him no matter what. And if he's there in the 5th round, there's a good chance I'm leaning towards him.
Wow.
I did tweet right before jumping on with you guys. I tweeted out, if I miss out on the big 3, the only other tight end I would consider in the single rounds is TJ Hockenson.
Yes! Let's go! Let's go!
I don't love him nearly as much as you.
But like he's not in this group. He's in this group with Tanyan, Hockenson, and maybe Trautman, Kmet. You could maybe toss up for me. I don't know which way I'm going, but I will take the time to say that I did just finish all of my tight end film for the rookies coming in, and I think people are being very rude about the talent coming in because I think there's way more talent than people think. So I think that this is a bigger year than everyone thinks.
Hell of a lot better than last year.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can get much worse than last year when it comes to talent. Although Cole Kmet, sorry, join our circle _
I don't like
Cole Kmet is still, you know, an option to break out this upcoming year.
Yeah.
All right. We finish this up. Mike, you want to give a little shout out to where they can find you, what you do, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I just basically talk fantasy football year round. You can follow me on Twitter. It's the best place, at Michael F. Florio. And then NFL.com, NFL Network, SiriusXM, and Rotoballer are the other spots you could find my work. But follow me on Twitter. You basically get it all there.
Love it, man. Steph?
I love the get it all there. I'm gonna definitely from you. You guys can find me at Steffi Smalls with 3 L's. And then of course, make sure you guys find us at Join Our Circle _ and Chase.
Oh, of course. Join Our Circle _ is what I really want you guys to follow. But if y'all feel like following me, you know, I just pump out Join Our Circle's content for now because, you know, that's what I'm doing right now behind the scenes. But once the season rolls around, I'll have a lot more content, or actually probably closer to these pro days. These pro days are going to have such a massive impact compared to previous pro days. And I think that us in the fantasy community need to work as a team to actually blow these pro days up, because it's going to give us content for like a month straight every single day that people are actually going to have to follow because there's no combine. So sitting there and looking at these concepts and blowing these up as a team is going to be absolutely huge. So make sure you all go out. You guys share each other's content. You guys promote for each other. Let's work as a team. Let's build fantasy football up, because I've been looking at some of the numbers and we are nothing yet. We are such, small fish in a massive pond, and there's so much more room we can be taking up. So work together, guys. Let's get it going. If you guys want to follow me, FF_intervention on Twitter. Once again, that's FF_intervention on Twitter. And you guys can find me at fantasyintervention.com. Go buy some pins. Pins. I love pins. Fantasyintervention.com. Thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you guys for letting us intervene with your fantasy
Football life. We're out.
Let's go.